job losses. Where are we at the moment, and what are some of the discussions around that and the way forward?
This is a very interesting question. I think as SACTWU we have been very matured as to how to deal with difficulties for the industries. Because if I look back from 1996, 1997, when our country was actually hit by the reduction of the tariffs without any supply measure, we saw actually a huge downfall of our industry. But we said we're not going to actually sit down and complain and cry, but we're going to do something. We think if you look at what has happened, of course the industry has faced quite a number of job losses in the last 10-15 years. But I must say, we are very proud of what our government has actually done. Between 2009 to now, if you look at the statistics from our research unit, shows that actually the reduction of jobs has actually declined. I must accept we're limping, of course. We lost thousands of workers, but we managed actually to develop policies. Government have managed to develop policies of intervention. If you look at what IDC and Department of Trade and Industry have intervened in the sector, more especially IDC, I must say there has been a much more intervention that I think our sector has actually benefited quite a lot to it. And also we are in a province, KZN, where there has been like over 200 million rand where ITC has intervened directly to this sector. This slow pace of job losses has actually tremendously declined. Statistics, I can even provide with statistics if we require it. But what is the challenge now is to how SARS actually enforce the whole question of inspection that takes place, most especially in the biggest harbour like Durban harbour, where there's still a very high number of illegal goods that comes in the country, and to that there's still actually quite a number of other products that comes under invoicing, and they flood actually our South African market. I think that's the strategic challenge that our law enforcement need to work on it very much so. Of course, we are very proud. We are having some engagement. We did a march, a picketing to SARS head office in Cape Town, I think 2-3 months ago. But the response that we're getting to SARS, we're very proud. We're going to make a very big announcement here as far as actually SARS is concerned in terms of the classification of our sector in terms of inspection is actually concerned. That announcement will actually be done in this Congress. We think currently what the sector actually requires now, it's actually a leadership. Both the trade union and the employers are supposed to actually provide leadership now. You cannot expect only government to intervene, but you also for yourself, as custodian of the industry, you've got to say to yourself, what is it that you provide as leadership going forward? That's what we need to do.
You spoke about, obviously, things are steady now. Sorry, you spoke about things being steady at the moment, no longer seeing massive job losses. What are the chances of when things, or are you saying things have stabilized, the chances of there being people retaining some of those jobs?
That's why I'm saying, I think between labor and business, we need to meet and begin to blend quite a number of policies that we need to develop that will actually allow the industry to resuscitate again. Chances are there, if one look at the current intervention that ITC and Department of Economic and Development have done, I'm beginning to see some factories actually opening up. I see some new factories actually opening up. But challenges are still there because you still got actually unscrupulous employers who are actually opening there and there without actually complying with the National Bargaining Council standard, undermining the compliance. You still have those actually bits and pieces that are scattered all over the country. But those things are things that we need to strengthen our policies. I think if I really sit back and answer your question directly, I see an opportunity, but that opportunity lies down to the leadership within the industry itself.
Okay, Mr. Kene, thank you very much for your time. We are now just going to be crossing back to inside the venue where President Jacob Zuma is about to deliver his keynote address.
Manza, awe tu, matla, geruna, all power to the people. Inde lenzela esihambayo, inde lenzela esihambayo. Inde lenzela esihambayo washumandela kubalandeli bakhe wathi sodibana nge-freedom day washumandela kubalandeli bakhe wathi sodibana nge-freedom inde lendlela esihambayo inde lendlela esihambayo inde lendlela esihambayo inde lendlela esihambayo washumandela kubalandeli bakhe wathi sohlangana nge-freedom day washumandela kubalandeli bakhe wathi sohlangana nge-freedom inde lendlela esihambayo inde lendlela esihambayo inde lendlela esihambayo inde lendlela esihambayo washumandela kubalandeli bakhe wathi sodibana nge-freedom amandla awethu. Thank you very much, comrades. Director of the program, Minister Ibrahim Patel, the Minister of Economic Development, and the former General Secretary of this powerful union. Deputy Minister Jeremy Crony, also a Deputy General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. Ministers and deputy ministers were present here. Leadership of COSATU, the president of SACTWU, Comrade Themba Khumalo, General Secretary of SACTWU, Comrade Andre Kriel, leadership of the Alliance present here, comrade delegates, it gives me great pleasure to address the 12th National Congress of the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, which meets under the theme Unity, Cohesion, and Radical Transformation for Growth and Decent Work. SACTWU represents the majority of workers in a strategic industrial sector of our economy. This union, therefore, has an important role to play in the economic future of our country and our region. Compatriots, the year 2013 is the 40th anniversary of the historic 1973 Durban strikes, which changed the face of labor relations in our country. This was as a result, widely described in this manner, of the fact that in the early 60s there was brutal suppression of the trade union movement, particularly because its cadres were part of the ANC and part of the party and became part of Umkhonto weSizwe. And therefore the union movement in the country was suppressed. This was re-emergence of the working class in an organized fashion. That's why it is important always to highlight it. South Africa learned an important truth which shaped our future, that an oppressed people can challenge oppressors successfully if they act together, organized in unity. The strikes began a process which shifted power to working people and played an important role in ultimately defeating apartheid colonialism. With the active participation of workers fighting for their own liberation. The strikes triggered the formation of trade unions, which fought long battles with a few employers to win the right to negotiate and engage in collective bargaining. These unions became the core of the Federation of South African Trade Unions, which combined with other unions to form a Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, in the mid-80s. So they were, in a sense, the beginning of today's non-racial and independent union movement. Secondly, this Congress takes place during Women's Month. It thus reminds us of women's selfless struggles against apartheid and for gender equality in this country and in the workplace. This month, we are celebrating the historic fact that South African women played a prominent role in the struggle for freedom, human rights, and justice for over a century. 100 years ago, in 1913, the extraordinary Charlotte Maxeke led about 700 women on a march against past laws in Bloemfontein in 1913, just a few months after the formation of the ANC. That was to be followed by several activities of and by women to advance the cause of freedom. South African women have also played a central part in the formation of militant trade unions. The majority of garment workers have historically been women, which makes Women's Month even more important to SACTWU. Women garment workers suffered extreme exploitation and starvation wages and work long hours. They decided to organize rather than live under those conditions. From 1928 to 1932, for an example, women garment workers organized more than 100 work stoppages and strikes, which shook the industry. We recall the contribution of leaders such as Viola Hashe, who became the first woman leader of the South African Clothing Workers Union and was then elected Vice President of the South African Congress of Trade Unions, SACTWU. In 1963, she was banned under the Suppression of Communism Act. SACTWU continues the proud tradition of fighting for women's rights and involving women in leadership positions. Compatriots, we are happy to meet you during much improved conditions for the textile and clothing sector. The industry came under tremendous pressure at the turn of the century and saw wholesale closures of manufacturing companies, both in the textiles and garment manufacturing sectors. The South African market was flooded with cheap imports from the Far East. The situation was aggravated by the influx of illegal imports, which were known for ridiculously low prices due to under-invoicing. Research, which was undertaken during this period, highlighted that added to the illegal imports, which were flooding the market, our textile and clothing sector was not globally competitive. There had been no investment in new technology and human capital development. There were no succession plans in place in most companies. Factories were closing down, workers were losing jobs. It was a difficult situation. There was a real need for strategic interventions in order to arrest the downward trend of the industry and stem the tide of job losses. Government, through the Department of Trade and Industry, working with labor, made a few interventions. You will recall that the Clothing and Textile Competitiveness Program was established in 2009 to stabilize employment and to improve overall competitiveness in the textiles and clothing sectors. The intention was also to build and improve capacity in the manufacturing and related value chain of the textiles, clothing, leather, and footwear sectors in South Africa. Another critical intervention was the designation of the textiles, clothing, leather, and footwear sectors for local procurement, which was done through the new Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act in December 2011. This new policy stated categorically that all government tenders for the sector must stipulate that the local content and manufacturing of products in textile, clothing, leather, and footwear be sourced locally. The Department of Trade and Industry is required to support letters confirming the non-availability of those raw materials before a company can source abroad. The designation of textile, clothing, leather, and footwear has seen more and more government tenders being awarded to bidders who utilize locally manufactured goods with maximum local raw material content. The overall impression from industry is very positive to the program. We urge companies to cooperate and not to attempt to hit the system as this, not to attempt to beat the system as this is being done to strengthen our economy and these sectors in particular, and to create and protect jobs. The Department of Trade and Industry is also working closely with the South African Revenue Service to ensure that there is no under-invoicing and related cheating. The success of the initiative has seen a marked increase on the value of invoices which are being presented to the customs officers at ports of entry. The import duty on clothing was also increased to the maximum that the World Trade Organization allows countries to charge, which is 45% to protect the local industry. The work being done through SARS in this sector has been so successful that we are planning to extend the concept to other sectors. There are also constant raids being undertaken by customs and other government departments to combat illegal import into the country, and these have seen significant volumes of illegal goods being confiscated and destroyed. We are happy that working together, we have managed to slow down the decline of the sector. The sector has come to life again as the industry has taken advantage of the incentives offered in the government incentives program. Approximately 61,376 jobs have so far been saved in companies that have benefited from government incentives. And to date, a total of 8,180 new decent sustainable jobs have been created in those entities. If we continue cooperating in this way in the sector, targets will be met. For an example, the leather and footwear cluster set itself the target of producing 100 million pairs of shoes per annum. The lowest the industry went to was 28 million pairs per annum in 2005. Currently, the production levels have increased to approximately 51 million pairs per annum. We appreciate the upward trend. Let me congratulate SACTWU for proving that it is not just the responsibility of government to protect and save jobs, but that of the unions too. You have played a critical role in saving and retaining jobs in the clothing and textile industry by saving entities that were on their way to sequestration. You did not only benefit workers in those companies, but also their families. Compatriots, as the ANC government, as you are aware, our election manifesto committed us to address the exploitation of workers and ensure decent work for all workers. We were also mandated by South Africans to protect the employment relationship, introduce laws to regulate contract worker, subcontracting and outsourcing, address the problem of labor broking, and prohibit certain abusive practices. In this regard, government has amended the Labour Relations Act, and the bill is before Parliament. The intention of the amendments is to address labor broking and prohibit abusive practices. Furthermore, organizational rights are extended to trade unions seeking to organize amongst temporary workers. We thank the partners at NEDLEC for constructive dialogue which enables our country to deal with such matters. Compatriots, as we prepare to celebrate 20 years of freedom, amongst the achievements we will be celebrating our worker rights. The Constitution of the Republic enshrines labor rights. It allows workers to negotiate and also to go on strike where the need arises within the ambit of the labor relations framework of the country. We support the constitutional right of strike. Equally important, the right to life and property rights are also rights protected by the Constitution. We urge labor and employers to work with us to ensure that all these rights are protected. In the event that it becomes necessary to go on strike, the strikes should take place in a peaceful manner which does not infringe on the rights of those who are not part of the strikes. We have tasked the Labour Department to identify measures to strengthen labour relations and social dialogue. We also urged Labour to work with us to promote the collective bargaining system. We are worried that in some sectors, we now find workers, committees, and other structures that have mushroomed, taking advantage of certain situations to the detriment of the rights of workers. We are proud of our country's system of collective bargaining, which is part of our fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic. It is further given effect by the Labour Relations Act of 1995. We want to work with Labour and business to promote this fundamental right of workers. Without collective bargaining, workers will not realize better living conditions, better living standards, better conditions of employment, and a democratized workplace. The absence of collective bargaining, in fact, leads workers to collective begging, which is unfair because they have a democratic right to collective bargaining. We'll continue to work with Labour and employers through the Labour Department to promote this right. Compatriots, let me congratulate Labour and business for progress made in the mining sector, which has been beset by labour tension for some time since last year. The Peace and Stability Framework Agreement was signed in July, which seeks to restore stability in the mining sector. We trust that working together, all parties will cooperate and see value in promoting lasting labour peace in our crucial mining sector. Compatriots, given the worrying unemployment situation, government has to ensure that instruments that cushion workers remain viable and helpful. The Unemployment Insurance Fund has grown immensely to over 83 billion rand in total assets. You will recall that during the economic meltdown, the fund responded by contributing to training layoffs, by helping companies that were facing economic distress to cope with the crisis. Rather than employees being laid off, they were retrained and absorbed back by their companies. Jointly with the mining sector, the fund is contributing to the housing development of communities of Northwest Province. We are also amending the Unemployment Insurance Act in order to include learners, public servants, and foreign workers who are currently not covered in terms of the provisions of the Unemployment Insurance Act. The amendments also extend the period of payment of benefits to the contributor from 8 months to 12 months, and also extend the period in which a contributor can lodge a claim from 6 months to 12 months. This is part of extending protection of the South African workforce during the period when they are most vulnerable, when they have lost their jobs. Comrades and compatriots, SACTWU participates in many social development programs that improve the lives of workers and communities where the workers live. I wish to congratulate you on your HIV and AIDS program, which reflects your intention of building a caring workplace. It shows your commitment to non-discrimination of people who are affected and infected by this epidemic. Our country is a shining example of progress in the fight against HIV and AIDS, with an improved life expectancy to date because of the contribution of patriots like yourselves who put the country first. Compatriots, once again, we are pleased to have worked with you as government in reviving and strengthening the clothing and textile sector, which faced severe difficulties. We share the success and also share the tasks that must still be performed on the road ahead in building a prosperous South Africa. Compatriots and friends, what is the task of a union? If I had all the time, I would say let us debate this. Well, some will say the task of the union in the main is to organize workers. Very important, because unorganized workers would not be able to fight for their conditions and their interests. Because if we are not organized, you are then exposed to employers to victimize you, to deal with you as an individual. And it is therefore important that you are organized, you are united, because if that is the case, you have the strength to protect one another, but to advance the interests. When I was still a trade unionist in the South African Congress of Trade Unions many years ago, we developed a slogan: an injury to one is an injury to all. That summarizes the point I've just made, that an unorganized workforce is vulnerable and it will be a casualty of the circumstances. But an organized workforce is a powerful instrument to improve the conditions of workers. But another task that is important for the union is to help the union to become a progressive union. Because if the union is not progressive, then you have problems. Because you can't move forward. You can't progress if you're not progressive. So it is important that the union becomes progressive. And this is a careful thing that we have got to think about. Because that means you begin to say it's not enough to look at the conditions at the factory floor, but look at the conditions of the working class, even beyond the factory floor. And therefore that says, if that is the case, it begins to introduce politics. You can't look away from politics. You have got to make sure that you are also part of the political life. The important thing about the workers is that precisely because industry forces the workers to be organized and to value organization and value unity, you are able to take that experience and influence to political organizations. During the struggle, I think we all know, as I said earlier, that workers played a critical part, not just to better their conditions at work, but because they were nationally oppressed and colonized in a special way, they also fought to defeat apartheid. They were the major force in that struggle. But you could also ask the task or the question, in a situation of a free country, a democratic country, what is the role of the union? Or unions, or the labor movement, particularly progressive labor movement in a democratic society, with regards to the very interests of the workers as well as their conditions at work. Because employers remain the same. Their interest is to maximize profits, whether in a democratic or non-democratic society. That is a common thing that they fight for. So what should be the role of the workers? Again, it is important that whilst workers fight and pay particular attention to their struggles at the factory floor, but they also look at whether is that democracy right? Is the democracy helping the country? Because if you don't do so, you are likely to retrogress. But how do you do that? How do you balance the trade union movement work and the politics? Can you succeed to maintain worker unity and fighting for the interests of the workers by doing more of your work in political arena? How do you balance this? This is a challenge to workers, particularly the progressive unions. How do you balance this? Because if you shift too much to political work, you leave the space at the factory floor, you are likely to have unprogressive unions taking the space and therefore recruiting your own members to them because you are no longer paying attention. That's the reason why we have this beauty entity called the Alliance in South Africa. So that those who are political entities do more of the political work, not the trade union work. and the link and your influence to these political entities, using your own experience, becomes important to ensure that these political entities do not go wrong. That's an important point that workers must always bear in mind. How to balance the two. Because at the end, you must not make the unions suffer. Because unions represent the majority and the poor. There are other issues that are of interest to people like myself, who was once a worker, who will therefore remain a worker in outlook and everything. I believe that there are successes we have made, but at times I also have a feeling that our own successes become obstacles to what we do. Well, that is an opinion. And we are entitled as workers to have our views and opinions, but engage with them so that we can come up with the correct solutions to our problems. When all said and done, democratic states must be seen that they help to advance the interests of the poor and the disadvantaged. That is our task to ensure. If we think that things are not going well politically, we talk to our comrades and help them to see what needs to be done. We cannot be seen to be almost oppositional. We help by saying, do the right thing, because it's not for the sake of the political organization, it is for the sake of all of us, and therefore it is our duty to do so. But the question is, how do we do it? How do we balance this? It's absolutely important, particularly because the challenge will continue. The challenge will continue of the varying interests, and therefore what people do as you move forward. Part of the interest that the workers should pay attention to is how legislation is done, how legislation helps the position of the workers and the poor. That's where you come in. And that's why in our democratic parliament, we have a process of opening up the bills for inputs so that the bill must indeed produce the desired results. And if the bills are about labor, we should take those bills as our bills to input so that those bills produce the desired results. But I must say, SACTWU has been an example of a union in our country, in the manner in which we have handled our things. I wish many unions, particularly in the alliance, could learn something from SACTWU. Comrades and friends and patriots, thank you for inviting me to this Congress, as I always feel at home here, because I think I always feel this is a type of trade unionism I know and I believe in. Keep it up. Very few unions have participated to save the industry in order to save their jobs, as we have done. Well, I thank the opportunity and I wish you a most successful 12th National Congress that will take the sector steps ahead and contribute to promoting inclusive growth and much needed jobs. I thank you. Amandla! Mandla! Away to all power! All power! Thank you very much, comrades.
Well, some very interesting words coming from President Jacob Zuma during his keynote address here. And obviously the President putting forward some questions on what a union is and what the role of labour movements should be in a democratic South Africa or democratic country. The word progressive union, the President rather made a number of references to that and the importance of progressive unions for South Africa. Also speaking about the organised workforce and being a powerful instrument to improve the conditions of workers, because unorganised workforces, as the President say, are likely to result in casualties. And of course him quoting that slogan, an injury to one is an injury to all. The President also, of course, talking about unions guarding against what he has said again, the unprogressive unions, giving them space, giving them space to recruit members on the ground. As I said, very interesting comments from the President. Food for thought for some of the delegates here, as they will continue, of course, over the next 4 days to discuss matters pertaining to the sector. That is where we leave it here in Durban, and it's back to the studio in Johannesburg.